Good evening and welcome to our live webinar. I am Danielle Daggio. I'm a community coordinator for Mercy Volunteer Corps. And tonight we are connecting with two alumni who served in Georgetown, Guyana, South America. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So thank you, all of you who are joining us tonight. We're really hopeful that the internet connection is going to stay strong for all of us during this call. This is a cross-country call right now, and so fingers crossed that it'll all work out. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to share some info about what it's like to volunteer with Mercy Volunteer Corps, especially abroad. So if you think of a question during this live broadcast, you can go ahead and submit them right here through our chat, and we can make sure to send you some answers right away. You can also submit questions to us through Twitter at Mercy Volunteers or through our chat with us button on the Mercy Volunteers website, or in the comments section as well. We make sure to include your email address in case we were if we're unable to get to you, but we will reach you tomorrow. So without further ado, let's go ahead and have our alumni introduce themselves. They're going to talk about, give their names, where they're calling from today, where you went to college, and where did you serve when you were in Guyana, and a little bit about what you did there. So Colleen, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Colleen Traub, currently in New York City. I went to Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I was in Guyana from 2015 until 2017. I worked at Mercy Hospital as a nurse, rotating in different units. I did medical surgical nursing, labor and delivery, and ICU. Yeah.
I am Andrea Haller. I live in Ohio and I went to Ohio Dominican. I served with Mercy Volunteer Corps from 2016 to 2017. I worked at Bosco Academy, which is a school for the boys of John Bosco Orphanage. I taught special education there and I loved it.
Thanks. And so why did each of you decide to do a year with MVC over all other options that you had?
So Mercy Volunteer Corps was actually the first volunteer organization that I looked into. I literally just typed into Google, like, volunteer abroad teaching special education in developing country that speaks English, or something like insanely specific, wanting all of the things that I wanted. And I pulled up Mercy Volunteer Corps first, and I was reading through, and I was like, oh my gosh, this has so many things I want. There were things that I didn't even think I wanted, but I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good thing. Like, community wasn't something that I had on my mind as something that I wanted, but when I saw that it was an option, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely want to live with other volunteers and people who are intentional about their living. And so I looked into other volunteer choices because I was like, there's no way the first one's the best one, even though this sounds exactly like what I want. So I kept looking, in every organization that I looked at, I was like, well, it has this, it doesn't have what I saw on Mercy Volunteer Corps that I really liked. So I only applied for Mercy Volunteer Corps because it was volunteering. I could teach abroad. That was really important to me, that I was using my education to teach, and I really wanted to teach special ed. I was going to be living in community, living simply, and it was another country, which was important to me. So that's how I ended up with MVC.
And I had a similar experience of only applying to Mercy Volunteer Corps, but it wasn't on my radar at all while I was discerning. I did a summer abroad in college in Ghana, and I had gone there alone. And it was an amazing experience, but very eye-opening because it was very hard to process everything, being the only volunteer there. in the program that I went through. So I'd originally wanted to do Peace Corps. I had been pretty set on it. And after that experience, I realized that I needed community and I needed a system to process all the emotions that would come up, which for me was a faith-based organization. So I, like Andrea, typed in faith-based organization with community. And Peace Corps had also offered just sectors of service. So you would either be in the health sector, the agriculture, education, but it didn't give you a specific job. And I knew that I wanted to be working as a nurse in a hospital and gaining experience as a nurse and using the skills that I had in a very concrete way rather than in like a networking, figure it out as you go kind of way. So Mercy Volunteer Corps was the only program that had community faith-based and working as a nurse in the hospital. Out of all of the programs out there, out of the hundreds and hundreds in Catholic Volunteer Network, it was the only one. So it was very unique in that way.
So both of you, it sounds like both of you were already looking at wanting to do service. Why did you decide that you wanted to do international service over serving in the US?
I felt called to do international service after having experience in college doing short-term service and feeling like short-term service taught me a lot, but that I wasn't able to give much because it had only been for a week or a month. So I really wanted to have the full experience of being there for more than a week or a month and learn from them. I think I was drawn to the cultural differences too and wanting to see what life looked like in a different culture and what being a nurse looked like in a different culture.
Very similarly to Colleen, it was important to me that I had a different cultural experience. And while there are like other cultures within the United States, I really wanted to see what it was like to live somewhere very far out of my comfort zone that was going to give me a completely different cultural experience than being in the US. It was important, and it still is, it's important to me that I was seeing more of the world and being able to experience life in a very different place, to be able to walk with people who were different than me.
All right, how would you describe Guyana to folks who have never been?
Hot. That's the first thing you notice, but you get used to it. Guyanese culture is very like laid back. You take your time. Relationships with people are very important. So there's a lot less of like a lot of American culture is like we do a lot of working and being productive, and in Guyana that's a lot less important. So you that makes room for relationship building and taking the time to enjoy where you are and who you're with. And then it's also a very enthusiastic culture. There are so many wonderful celebrations that include different religions and different cultures that everyone celebrates together with a lot of enthusiasm. So it can be a lot of fun to get to know different types of people in exciting ways.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is also that it was very hot, but in a very good way. I missed that the most, I think. Well, not really the most, but especially with winter coming, and the days getting shorter, that was something that I really loved about Guyana was the sun rose and set at the same time every day. It never changed, and the weather really never changed either. So there were no like cold winter days where you're just miserable. It was always very energetic, and everyone was outdoors all the time because of the beautiful weather. But I think something that people don't know much about with Guyana is that especially Georgetown identifies very much with the Caribbean culture. So they have an accent similar to Trinidad or Jamaica, a different dialect of English. A lot of Jamaican, Caribbean foods, and a diverse population too, with Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian, and most recently a lot of Chinese Guyanese as well. So it's a always changing place.
So I know that it sounds like both of you took a lot of time making sure that you found the right program that was right for you. Once you started entering into the process with Mercy Volunteer Corps, could you tell me a little bit more about what that was like for you and what were the different steps that you had to take?
So once you apply, you're like always talking to someone who's a part of the program. So Marie and Carrie were always working with me and helping me in the discernment process of, is this really what I'm called to do? So after applying, you're invited on discernment weekend for the international program, where you get, it's like a nice space to just reflect on your journey so far and what you feel called to do in the future. So on my discernment weekend, it was just a nice space where other people's influence wasn't there, and I really had the time to slow down, not think about anything else other than where am I being called right now, and how could MVC be a part of that, or if there was a different path. And then after discernment weekend, you're like invited to be a part of MVC. And after I finished discernment weekend, I was like, I know this is where I am called to be. I just felt so sure. Like there were things that I was nervous about, as, moving to a whole new country with people you don't know, you would. But I knew it was where I belonged. I just felt so at home during discernment weekend with the MVC tenets and philosophies on volunteering.
One of the other steps too in the process is a phone or video interview, or maybe in person for people who are close. So you put the application in, which I don't remember when it's due, and then if the application seems like you're a good fit for Mercy Volunteer Corps, then you do a phone or video interview. But what I loved about the process with Mercy Volunteer Corps versus other programs that I've heard about is that it was always a mutual discernment. So it was never like, are you good enough to be a Mercy volunteer? It was always like, is this what you want to be doing? Do you fit the program's values? Like, do you know what you're getting yourself into? Let me give you more information about it. So it's always like a mutual discernment and a group effort, rather than like, prove to me you're good enough, which I really felt from the beginning. Even with the phone interview, I was very nervous, and then I talked to Carrie on the phone, and it was like we've been friends forever. And then going on to discernment weekend, I felt the same, that I was very nervous to go, and then I went, and it was like meeting friends that you knew for a very long time, that you just had the same values. And I think people either like knew that it was exactly what they wanted to be doing, or they realized like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. So it really showed me the beauty of discernment, that when it's left open like that, you like fosters a lot of self-awareness and growth and cool discernment together.
And it sounds like it's a place where like it really feels like it's a choice, that this just feels like in both ways, that you feel like it was a good fit, and they as Mercy Volunteer Corps feels like it's a good fit for you too. And I love how both of you talked a lot about how that like level of mutuality was really important, and sometimes I think that that's really difficult to discuss with some folks. And just for some clarity, the deadlines are, we have a priority deadline for January 20th, And then the final deadline for international is March 2nd. But if you decide that maybe international isn't right for you and you've already applied for international, your application then gets rolled over into US. And so you're still in the process with Mercy Volunteer Corps, and you don't have to send a new application in. You actually, there's only one application for both US and international. The international application, if you're looking to serve in Guyana, just has an additional written response, and that's mostly that's like the differing factor, and additionally the discernment weekend. But I want to get a little bit back to both of you. It does take a good amount of time to settle into a place, and especially when you want to consider living and serving internationally. What factors played into your decisions of doing 1 year versus 2 years? I mentioned that because most programs who are offering an international service are multiple years, whereas ours is 1 with the option to renew. So if you guys want to speak on that, that'd be great.
So it only being required to do 1 year was one of the reasons I chose MVC. My family is really important to me, and I couldn't imagine being away from home for 2 years. And so I went into it like, I'm only going for 1 year and then I'm coming back. I need my family. And I made the decision, since I had already made that decision, I just didn't even consider staying for 2 years. And then when I got into the latter half of my year, I was like, wow, I really could have done 2 years. This is once in a lifetime, amazing experience that I sometimes wish I would have chosen to stay for 2 years. But it only being a 1 year commitment made me feel a lot safer in the decision to go abroad.
I also had a similar experience, that I appreciated Mercy Volunteer Corps' commitment being 1 year. I think it made it easier to tell my family too that I would only be there for a year. And at the time, really, it wasn't discussed much, I guess, that it could be renewed for a second year. It was only when I was in Mercy Volunteer Corps that it started coming up, and I felt like, just like anything, your first year, like your freshman year in college or your first year of a job, you're just not that good at it yet. Like, you just barely made friends, you barely felt comfortable. So in the middle and end of my first year, I realized that I wanted to actually be good at it and offer like real skills that I had learned in the first year, and grow deeper in community too. So I still remember the day where I told my family that I was going to stay a second year. We didn't have good Wi-Fi in Guyana, and found good Wi-Fi in the laundry room of the hospital and called them. And so it was a very hard decision. There were a lot of factors, and I'm close to my family, and being away for 2 years was definitely like a factor with my family and my friends, and how much I would miss in their lives. But technology is amazing, and I don't regret it for a minute that I was able to spend 2 years with Mercy Volunteer Corps.
So after your time in Guyana, how were you able to translate your experience into what you do now?
Mercy Volunteer Corps, even though I have been back for going on 3 years, I think now, which is crazy. It's 2 years, I don't know. Feels like yesterday. But it still comes up in every job interview that I do, in every interaction with any Catholic organization. it's like I'm part of this family that everybody seems to know about, which I am always surprised at. I feel like it's a small little family, but really it has its roots everywhere. So it's come up in interviews in it's standing out as an experience that not everyone my age has. But it also translates in the skills that I gained there. Most notably being adaptable and appreciating other cultures and challenging my own white savior complex and my own cultural appropriation, all of these things that I was not aware of in myself until I went to Guyana and really had to face them. So even like in my life now in New York City, I am surrounded by all of these different cultures, and I'm constantly using the skills that I gained in Mercy Volunteer Corps to appreciate and respect and value those cultures and be self-aware of myself in them.
Yeah, I think I had no idea beforehand that a year of service internationally would transform like every idea I ever had about the world and how it works and how I choose to live, but it literally impacts everything. There was a lot of like Colleen said, recognizing things about myself and being more willing now to challenge my own thinking or the thinking around me and the different way that I just view the world now and how I interact with it. As far as work goes, it translated pretty directly for me in that I still teach special education and I work with kids with emotional disabilities. And a lot of those disabilities have come from traumatic experiences that students have had. And a lot of the boys in Guyana also experience similar things. So oftentimes my kids remind me of the boys, and then we're able to make connections between cultures, and they'll see pictures of the boys and ask me about them, and getting to share that two different cultures and seeing the similar things between kids has been really neat. But it really impacts every aspect of how I interact with the world every day.
What is one thing that has stayed with you from your time after Guyana?
It's hard to pick just one. I think the like intentionality would be how I would summarize what I keep with me. There was so much intention behind everything that we did in Guyana, living in community and being intentional with our relationships, being intentional with our spending and living simply. Guyanese culture in general, being intentional with relationships, it has carried with me so much, and living in the present moment and being intentional with the choices and actions and how I'm spending my time in relationships.
It is also hard for me to pick one thing because I think of Guyana and my experience with Mercy Volunteer Corps every day still. But I think one thing that stuck with me, especially because of the Mercy values in Mercy Volunteer Corps, is hospitality. The Mercy Sisters in Guyana were a huge support to us. And a lot of them are over the age of 70 or 80, but they are still so good at hospitality. They like make you feel welcome. They invite you over for your birthday. And the Guyanese friends that I had in Guyana too were so hospitable in teaching me the language and the culture and the food, and sometimes laughing at me, but mostly being supportive, and just being so welcoming. So that stuck with me, moving to a new place now, but also being surrounded by a lot of people who are new to the US, and thinking about how great I was treated in Guyana, and wanting to treat people who come to the US like I was treated when I moved there. So.
Last question. What is some advice you would offer to people who are thinking about applying to MVC and specifically coming to Guyana?
Do it. There's, if you're even thinking about it, there's no reason not to apply. Like we talked about earlier, the discernment process is mutual. So if you realize later that that's not where you're called to be, that's okay. It's an incredible experience that if it's what you're called to do, don't hesitate to take a leap of faith and do it.
My advice would be to talk to people. The staff in Mercy Volunteer Corps is the best at being intentional about individual relationships. There's not one person that they don't care about or that they won't make time to have a phone call with. And that goes for the alumni too. I think that was a huge part in my decision. I talked to 2 alumni before I decided to accept the invitation to be a volunteer in Guyana. And I still remember those conversations like to a T of exactly what we talked about, because they were very influential in my decision. And I think that there are a ton of alumni that can each talk to a different part of the experience, whether it's like exactly the degree that you had, or you're from the same state, or you have similar family situation. There's someone that's experienced part of what you're feeling, and can relate to you and give advice on it. So
Thanks. So I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I hope that these questions have inspired you to think more seriously about serving with MVC. Our priority deadline is just 4 months away on January 20th, and our final deadline for serving internationally is March 2nd. We do have a rolling application, so the best tip that I always tell everybody is the sooner you get your full application in, the better. This is our very first recruitment webinar for the fall, so stay tuned for more events this recruitment season. Our next webinar will be on November 19th, where we will unpack one of the main tenets of our program, what is community. So if you continue to have any questions at all about our program or application process, or even just about a year of service in general, please feel free to reach out, because we are here to help, just like Andrea and Colleen have been talking about. So the best way to do that is to hit us up through our contact us email on our website, and all of our information to reach us is on mercyvolunteers.org. So thank you again, and have a great night. Bye.